world. And so we see that there is an undermining still taking place. As a result now of this infiltration of this movement that was taking place, the errors and philosophy of Catholicism have well nigh permeated the Protestant churches, and most Protestants today have accepted the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church in varying degrees. Now, consider, with the release of this Protestant, or with this Jesuit Bible, the Catholic English Bible, the Protestant churches became astirred, especially there in England. Elizabeth sent to Geneva for Beza. Beza was one of the greatest scholars of that time. He could not come, and so he sent back to Elizabeth and told her that she needed to get Cartwright. He stated, says, the sun does not shine on a greater scholar than Cartwright. Well, Elizabeth did not want to enlist the aid of Cartwright because he was a Puritan. And Elizabeth did not like Puritans, but she considered that Puritans were better than Romans, and so she chose a Puritan to lead the fight against Catholicism and preserve Protestantism. Now, what Cartwright did, he went to work immediately, and he gathered all of the Latin and the Greek and the Hebrew manuscripts that could be found, as well as the testimonies of the early church fathers, and he began to level blow after blow against this latest and most dangerous product of Catholicism, this Jesuit corrupted Catholic English Bible. And when it was over, the Word of God came forth victorious. You know, 1,000 years had gone by since this type of a test had been permitted, and the Vulgate yielded before the received text. The Latin was vanquished before the Greek, and the mutilated versions before the pure Word of God. But now Rome, realizing that their corrupted Latin Bible had been defeated, they were now having to take a different approach. It had been shown that this Latin Bible contained so many numerous errors that they went to work now on the Greek manuscripts. And the Sinaiticus and the Vaticanus were brought out of the dusty drawers and put before the world as if it were the Greek Bible that the church had always had throughout the centuries, whereas in reality it had been out of sight and hidden for over 1,000 years. Now, by 1611, King James was ruling at that time, and that's where the King James Bible gets its name. He was the king at the time, and he told them to go ahead and make a translation. And this King James translation was a monumental immortalization of the received text, and it was accomplished by a very careful procedure. You see, what they did, the church appointed 54 scholars, only 47 of who actually served on the committee, and these 54 scholars were divided into 3 groups. One was placed at Cambridge, one at Oxford, and the other at Westminster. Now, these were then divided again into groups, making a total of 6 groups that were to work on this translation. And each member, each of those 54, or the 47 that actually showed, each of those worked individually. Once their translation was finished, it was submitted to their committee. Once that committee was finished with it, it was sent to each of the other committees for review. If anything, the slightest thing was found wrong with it, it was sent back to the original committee to start the process all over again. And so, and on top of that, all of the scholars of Europe and in the known world at that time were called upon to give input into this. So besides the 47 scholars in the 6 various committees, which went over each item at least 14 times, these other people were called upon, and it was all laid out for the whole world to know what they were doing. Nothing at all was done behind closed doors and by a few select men under a ironclad code of silence, and for the purpose of making a great financial gain by dropping a new Bible on the world. They were concerned with one thing: bringing the pure Word of God to the world. And they were doing something that everybody in the past nearly had lost their life in trying to do. Now, this is quite a contrast to the revisers of 1881, which we will be studying the next time, who met in secret for 10 years, working as one body under this ironclad rule of silence, and then to effect a very large sale. As a matter of fact, 2 million copies sold in England alone in 4 days, and 365,000 just in the city of New York, and another 110,000 in Philadelphia. You see how large of a sale was brought by this. These people threw their translation on an unsuspecting world. There was no attempt to conciliate the public. No samples were sent out for examination and criticism. The public was simply compelled to accept what was dropped in their lap when they woke up one morning. Westcott and Hort not only changed the English Bible, they went and changed the Greek text, which had been preserved down through the centuries. And this new Greek text of these two men were laid out before the translators or the revisers as though it were the true Word of God. And their New Testament in Greek was not even released to the public until 5 days before the English translation came out. Now, the world had a Bible that no one had any input to except a small, select group of people who were leaning to bring the church back to Catholicism. You see, that revision committee of 1881 produced a Greek text that had 5,788 errors or variant readings in the Greek text alone. Even Catholic scholars today have acknowledged that the King James translation is the stronghold, my friends, of Protestantism. Notice what they said. Who will say that the uncommon beauty and marvelous English of the Protestant Bible is not one of the great strongholds of heresy in this country? This is given to us by the Church of Rome, one of their leading scholars. Now, why would this Catholic scholar say that the English Bible is the stronghold of heresy? The reason, my friend, is simple. Because its teachings are different from those of Protestantism and are different from those of Catholicism. The fact has long been acknowledged that the Protestant and Catholic Bibles teach something different. It's realized for centuries. And the King James Bible was the stronghold of Protestantism, but not only that, it built a gigantic wall or barrier against the spread of Catholicism. Again, notice again from one of their writers, the printing of the English Bible is proved by far the mightiest barrier ever reared to repel the advance of popery and to damage all the resources of the papacy. But where is that Bible today, my friends? Most colleges and universities and seminaries advocate the use of the modern translations. Most elementary schools and secondary schools do the same if they're Christian schools. Most churches that have pew Bibles have them in them. Why is this taking place? Do you see the danger that's coming? I hope you do, my friends. And until next time, may God bless you very greatly.